Okay, so what is growth mindset? You might have heard about that. It's something that's become a lot more popular in the last maybe decade or so, including in schools. And I think the important thing to remember with when we're thinking about growth mindset is that it's not just about positive thinking, which sometimes might be something that we think. So what is it? So in essence, growth mindset, as opposed to a fixed mindset, is the understanding that our abilities can change over time. So if we have a growth mindset, we're aware that the stage that I'm at right now isn't necessarily the stage that I'm always going to be. I'm goodish at this at the moment, maybe, but I could be better. And that my ability is not just fixed completely. So we might have different feelings ourselves about whether or not ability and intelligence is just something that just is. That's just a part of who you are, in the same way that you've got a certain eye colour. And whatever we think about the actual starting point of intelligence and how much of that is predetermined, we do know that change is also possible. So it kind of knowing that, it makes sense to have a growth mindset, because abilities can change, and they do change. I'm just going to screen share and just go into a little bit of a PowerPoint just to sort of structure our thinking a little bit. So, if we think about, what is ability? Is it something that's innate? There's all sorts of studies that are done to sort of suggest both ends of this. So I'm not going to sort of dispute whether or not there is a starting point that is innate, but there is lots of evidence also that intelligence can change depending on what you do, depending on the kinds of exposure that you have to different learning opportunities, to the way that people talk to you when you're growing up, to the TV that you watch, the books that you read, the interactions that you have, and the effort that you put in, and how much you can change your own ability based on the effort you put in. So, this concept has kind of been understood for quite a while, but increasingly over the last number of years, it's become clearer for us as we've understood more about the neural connections in our brains, and we've understood that actually new neural connections do develop, and they do get faster. So if you think back to when you learned a new skill, maybe when you learned to read, or when you learned to ride a bike, or when you learned to drive a car, that was awkward at first. It felt really clunky and difficult. And the more you did it, the more comfortable it felt. And now it's really easy for you. You don't put much effort in, because you've formed those new neural connections, that is, connections between nerve cells in your brain. So this is a picture here of lots of interconnected nerve cells in your brain, and the more we use particular connections, the faster those connections go, and the more our ability in that area grows. But if we know that new neural connections can grow, whatever our starting point is, we know that our intelligence and our abilities can grow over time. So if we think about that guy with the box there, he's got a fixed mindset. He's just like, this is just what I am. I'm just rubbish at this. I'm just good at this. And that's just who I am. And that's contrasting with the other mindset there, the growth mindset of somebody who thinks, no, I can grow over time. I do change. So there is a reason to have a growth mindset, because you can get better, whatever the starting point is. And what we know is if you're aware of that and you approach tasks with a growth mindset, it then makes a difference for how you interact with those tasks. So if I think, oh, I'm not good at this, or this is just my level of ability, when I come up against challenge, I'm more likely to think, okay, well, that's just evidence of the limit of my ability there. Whereas if I have a growth mindset and I come up against challenge, I'm more likely to think, okay, this is something I can't do at the moment, but with some effort and some perseverance and the right strategies, I can develop. So having a growth mindset really impacts on how you interact with challenge and how you respond when things get quite difficult. So this concept of growth mindset, it's coined by an American psychologist called Carol Dweck, and she conducted lots of experiments or studies with children and looked at how they approach tasks, and found that those children who believed that putting in effort and the strategies are what made the difference approached challenge very differently to those who had a fixed mindset and just thought, this is just who I am. Interestingly, we can support children to have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset depending on the type of feedback and praise we give them. So it's pretty common for us to give praise to children for being clever, having good abilities. However, although that might feel good in the moment, that encourages a child to think, this is just a level of my ability, it's innate, I just am clever or not. So if we look at these sets of studies here, there was a set of children who were praised for their effort in some puzzles, and some children who were praised for their ability when they interacted with some puzzles. And the way they interacted with the tasks varied depending on the type of praise they were given. So one set of children, they started off with very sort of doable, easy puzzles, and the adults in the study were saying things to them like, "Oh wow, my goodness, you must be putting in a lot of effort. You must be trying really hard at this. I can see you really concentrating." So those children were praised for effort and the approach. The other children were praised for their ability. So if they did well on those initial easier puzzles, the adults gave them the feedback that, "Oh my goodness, you must be so clever. This is going so well. You're so clever." So interestingly, what happened next was they were given puzzles that were very difficult, and actually they were not going to do well at. So it was purposely designed so that they were going to struggle significantly. For those children who have been praised for their effort and their perseverance and their strategies, they carried on enjoying the puzzles even when they were tricky, because you can still be trying hard and you can still be concentrating even when it's tricky. Their perseverance and their persistence continued because they were still feeling good about putting in effort and showing grit and perseverance. And because of that type of approach, their performance on the tasks got better. Contrasting that with children that had been praised for their ability and were told, "Oh gosh, you're so clever," when they came up against puzzles that were going to be too difficult for them to do initially, their enjoyment went down, because what they were finding then, from their point of view, was that, okay, this is evidence that actually I'm not that clever. So now that I've got a task that I can't do, I don't want to engage with it anymore. This is relevant for children who are struggling with tasks in general and those who tend to do quite well academically. It's still the same. If you've got this perception that my ability is a fixed quantity, challenge and difficulty can come as evidence to you that that is the limit of your ability. So when the puzzles got too difficult, their enjoyment went down, their persistence went down, their perseverance went down, because they didn't want to engage with these tasks that showed up their limits. Because of that different type of approach, then their performance went down. And then interestingly, at the bottom there, it just notes that children who are praised for effort and perseverance didn't feel particularly uncomfortable about being truthful about how they did in the puzzles, whereas the children who've been praised for ability and were encouraged to think being clever is good rather than trying hard is good, a lot of them, 40% of them, lied about how well they'd done. Yeah, so that's interesting. So this concept that people who believe that their minds, like their bodies, can get fitter and stronger tend to enjoy challenges that stretch them, whereas people who think that their ability is a fixed quantity tend to see challenges as a threat to their supposed level of ability. So we see this even with children that have been doing well in school for quite a while, happy with that, happy coasting along, come up against some challenge and can really struggle with that because that's a threat to their identity. So what we're doing is we're thinking about how we want a child to construct their identity. Do we want to attach it to being clever, or do we want to attach it to helpful qualities like perseverance, concentration, grit, determination. So, you know, if we're not praising ability, what is that going to look like? We're praising their effort and we're praising the approach that they're putting in. If saying things like that, you know, you put in good effort, if that word doesn't work, then we're talking about grit. My goodness, you've shown a lot of perseverance there. I can see you really sticking at it, or the approaches that they're using. You can see you thinking really carefully. I can see you really concentrating. That really pays off. That's really admirable. Okay, so this is what we're seeing when we're thinking about growth mindset, that it's not just about positive thinking. Come on, have a growth mindset, which maybe sometimes we do hear a little bit. It makes sense to have a growth mindset if we're aware that our brains are able to change. Our neural connections have an element of what we call plasticity, i.e. they change and they mold and they develop over time. If our brains have plasticity, and we know that our brains can change and develop, it makes sense to have a growth mindset, because growth is possible. And then because we have a growth mindset, we interact with tasks differently. We don't shy away from challenge so much. And as adults, we can help children to have a growth mindset by, you know, sharing with them, for starters, the fact that, you know, abilities do change. It's just a factual thing. You know, you might feel things aren't going so well now, but brains do change and we do develop. And giving them effective feedback for things like effort and approach, determination. You know, I can see you struggling with that at the moment. Let's just carry on trying, because, you know, we know that we develop. Talking to them in a way that encourages that understanding of growth mindsets and that focus on the approach rather than pigeonholing our ability. Okay, so that's what growth mindset is. I think it's a really helpful concept. It's something that can get spoken about unhelpfully, like I said, just people assuming it's just about positive thinking. But, you know, it really does make a difference, the way that we talk to children, then the impact that has on their approach to tasks. And as the study suggests, it can make a difference even within a specific concept, a context rather. So although you might struggle to think, oh gosh, I can't change the child's mindsets overall, but within, you know, even within a context, even within a lesson, or even within their approach to homework, the way that we talk to them about those tasks and the kinds of feedback that we give them can make a difference in that context. And we know that, you know, with very young children, they really are susceptible to internalizing the self-talk that they hear around them. So it's the sorts of messages that we give them become their own self-concept over time. Okay, there we go. That's growth mindset.